Morning guys, welcome to Philosophy. Today we're going to be chatting about something a little bit different. It's not really related to fire, but it does impact me on my own personal fire path. So it is something I wanted to put together just because when I started looking for a condo, I couldn't really find a whole lot of stuff that was very specific. So I wanted to make this video about the whole buying process of purchasing a condominium in Calgary. The reason that I decided to buy property is because I have actually been saving a down payment for quite a few years, and it just seemed like the right time. I had been renting a place in Calgary for the last 3 years, and I was starting to have a few issues with the property management company, and I also just thought there were a few things I wanted to change and do that I couldn't do in a rental. I started looking back in August last year, and I looked at probably about 15 to 20 different places. I'm just going to walk you through the process of step by step what you should do if you're looking to purchase a condominium in Calgary. The first thing I would recommend is creating a list of your wants versus what are your non-negotiables. What things does this property have to have that you can't change your mind on? Something like how many bedrooms does it have and the location. Something that really changed for me throughout this process is that my list of wants, needs, and things that I would like to have changed throughout looking at certain properties in my price range. The second thing I would do, which is sort of in conjunction with number one, which is making the list of the things that you want, is what is your budget? And in staying in line with the fire path and trying to save for retirement that's earlier than most people, I would say, and I'm sure that you've heard this before, but buying what you can afford in terms of at the very top of that amount, you should be trying to buy something that meets your needs now, potentially that can grow with you and also not be at that top of your budget. You want something that's a little bit lower in your budget so that you can actually keep saving for retirement and all the other things that you want to do. For myself, I was dead set on saving 20% up for a down payment. I didn't want to pay PMI, which is mortgage insurance. When you don't put down 20%, you put down less. You have to pay a penalty or a fee every month to build up until you have enough equity in the place. When you get to that 20% equity, then you don't have to pay that anymore. So I just didn't want to pay that whatsoever if I didn't have to. And because I was looking for such a long time, I was able to save up enough to purchase a home that was in the $300,000 range. This is just on my own, by the way. I did not purchase property with anyone else. I didn't have any co-signers. I didn't purchase it with a spouse or anything like that. So I saved up this money just on my own. It was really, really important to me to have that 20% down. I do believe that you can save up as little as 5% if maybe you have a small family and you want to get into the market a little bit sooner and it makes sense for your budget. That is an option. However, I would highly recommend, if you can wait, to wait and save up that 20% down and kind of figure out what exactly you want in that span of your saving journey. Something that was also very important to me is when I bought a property, I had to take into consideration that if for some reason I had to support the mortgage payments on my own, that I would be able to do that. Because I purchased this property on my own, I kind of already budgeted to be able to afford it just out of my own salary. Number three is, do you use a realtor? I looked into this quite a bit. I researched, I went on Reddit, I did a lot of Google searching. I spoke to my dad, I spoke to my spouse's father, and just kind of went around and asked people if they use a realtor and how the experience was. A lot of the information that I found online said that you don't have to use a realtor and that you could potentially get a lower price on a property if you didn't. After going through this whole process, I definitely recommend using a realtor if it's your first time. I think even if I went to purchase a second property, that I would use a realtor again, just because there is a lot of information that they know that you don't. Not that it's not possible for you to do it on your own. I think if you're selling a property, it might be a little bit different because then you don't have to pay the realtor fees. If you're a buyer, you don't have to pay realtor fees anyway. It's worked into the purchase price of the property, but you don't out of pocket pay for it. There was a lot of work that my realtor did that I just didn't have the desire to do or didn't have the time to do. He would set up all the appointments and kind of give me once I put an offer in and everything, he did all of the paperwork, and I just had no motivation or time to do that whatsoever. So I really valued having that relationship with my realtor to kind of help me in the process. And he definitely helped with helping to gauge what a property should be valued at and how to negotiate through the process. So it really comes down to, what is your time worth? If you want to spend quite a lot of time learning about the laws and all of the paperwork you have to go through to purchase property or to sell it, then maybe that's worth your time. For me, I definitely think using a realtor was the absolute 100% best way to go for a first-time home buyer. Number 4 is research online. So I spent quite a few months looking up listings online and areas and doing some research in how close were these areas that I was looking at to amenities, to grocery stores, to work, to gyms, to green spaces was a really big thing for me. Parking as well, because I have a vehicle and so does my spouse. There are actually a lot of really awesome resources online that give you virtual tours of a space, which photos are one thing, but when you get a virtual tour, it gives you a much better understanding of what the layout of that place is. So I spent a lot of time on the RE/MAX website and just looking at listings within the price range that I wanted and how many bedrooms and all of that. And I looked all around the city. I looked in every quadrant. Originally, when I was looking back in August, I only wanted a detached home, and I was very set on getting a detached home. I didn't want a condo. I didn't want to have to deal with condo boards. I didn't want a townhome because those are also condos technically. Some of them are, some of them aren't. So I just looked around a lot, and eventually with what my price range was, it just turned out that condos made more sense because of where I work, where I want to live, and what kind of amenities that I really value. And getting all of those things in an area that was outside of the city, that was in my price range for a detached home, it just wasn't realistic for me in the 5 to 10 year range right now. Another thing that I did was, after looking at a place online, if I really, really liked what I was seeing and I wanted to set up an appointment, there were a few times where I actually drove to that location to take a look at what was close. How many shops, where were the grocery stores, how busy were the roads for parking? Was there a lot of sort of buildup of snow and stuff like that? Is it a road that isn't as plowed as some of the other streets in the city? Where the sun was at during the day and during the evening, because I've been living in an apartment for the last 3 years that faced northwest. So I'd really only get the sun later in the day. And I wanted something that either faced south or southwest or just straight west. I ended up changing that later on because obviously places that face south are just a lot more expensive because everybody wants that. And they were very difficult to find. I found most of the places I looked at faced east. So after doing all this research online, I started to communicate with a realtor. I went to a few different websites. So RE/MAX was the one I used the most for looking up properties, going through photos, going on virtual tours, because they just have a really good setup and a really good search feature. There is another website called Calgary Homes, and I believe it's owned or just used by the Justin Haver and Associates company. And I ended up finding my realtor through Justin Haver. And I basically just went on their website and then I typed in the form on the side that said, do you want to set up a showing? So after seeing some of these places and kind of changing my focus to condominiums, I did a lot of research on what I could afford and taking into consideration what the condo fees were. So something that a misconception, whatever you want to call it, I had before looking at condos. The industry that I work in is security, and I used to work in fire alarm and working with a lot of condominiums, a lot of condo boards and property managers, and there was just always a ton of issues. But after going through the thought process and a lot of research between a detached home and a condo, the condo fees aren't there to make the condo money. They're there to take care of any kind of maintenance that the building requires. So if you have a detached home and your roof needs replacing and it's $10,000, you're paying for that out of pocket. If you have a condo building that has a pretty healthy reserve fund and they have good condo fees that they're building up over time, If the roof needs replacing and say it's, $20,000 in a larger building, maybe up to $50,000, you don't pay for that out of pocket. It comes out of the reserve fund, and then your condo fees build that back up so that all these regular maintenance issues aren't like a one-time expense for the condo owners. And I know that it can happen where something can happen to the building and you have to pay out of pocket, but that's a whole other thing. There's a lot of research you have to do when buying a condo and going through their documents and seeing. We'll get into that part later. So after looking at about 15 to 20 different places, houses, detached houses, townhomes, I looked at everything. I came across a place that was right downtown that had a lot of amenities really close by. It was a little bit closer to work for me at the time. And it had all the space and features that I wanted in a place. The condo fees were reasonable. So after looking at this place in person, I got a really good vibe on it, and I decided to put in an offer. So this is number 5, what to do when you're ready to make an offer. So I spoke to my bank probably 2 weeks, maybe a month before putting an offer on this place. And that was just in preparation of finding the place that I wanted and being able to make an offer right away. So I spoke to my bank and went through the process of starting an application with them for pre-mortgage approval. I use TD, which is my main bank, to do everything. And I basically just called their hotline for their mortgage application and did a bit online, and then worked with someone over the phone who was out of Toronto for probably a few weeks to kind of get a sense of what I could afford. And this is something that you do in step 2 with your budget, is you can talk to your bank well in advance to figure out what you can afford and what you should be spending. But when you're actually ready to make that offer, your pre-approval and everything should be ready to go, and you already have that budget in place. So when you're actually applying to make an offer, your realtor is going to help you quite a bit in this process. There are a lot of documents that you have to give to your bank to prove where the down payment is going to come from, if it's from another institution, where you work, how much you make, all of the kind of like regular things that you would expect your bank to ask. For me, I had an issue with getting approval in the beginning because I just had started a new job and I was still in 3 months probation. So they basically told me if I was in probation that I wouldn't be able to qualify for a mortgage, and that I had to wait 3 months or a few months until I passed that point, until I could make an offer. So I did do that. So when you're making an offer, something that your realtor will help you out as well with is that an offer should always be contingent on, at the very least, a home inspection. I know that this isn't always the case. If you're in a real estate market that's super hot, a lot of people will buy property without even having it inspected. And I know this for a fact. I was just speaking to my father, who lives in Ottawa, where the real estate market is exploding and people are getting offers like $100,000 above asking with no conditions in the offer whatsoever. No home inspection, nothing. Once you have that home inspection, you can start to negotiate with the seller on items that need to be repaired. Either you pay for them and they reduce the price, or they pay for them and get them fixed before you actually get possession of the property. Another really big thing for condominiums is making sure you have that contingency that you have to review the condominium documents. Those documents will tell you what the reserve fund is, any kind of recent maintenance problems they've had, how many people in the building rent, which is a really big thing with condos. Is you would like preferably to have more owners actually living in the condo as to renters, because owners historically take much better care of the property. And so when I made an offer, I worked with my realtor on how to present it. He put everything together and worked with the seller's realtor back and forth. I was just kind of there to decide what the next step would be. So after the realtor had put the offer letter together with all the contingencies that I wanted, he sent it to the seller, and we went a little bit back and forth on the price. So the condominium was listed at $215,000, and with some of the help of my realtor and my partner, we kind of talked about it. There were a few items in the place that needed to be fixed up. There were other units in the building that were for sale for a little bit less, and we negotiated back and forth and eventually got to a place where $200,000 was the agreed upon amount that I was going to purchase this place for. So at this stage, when you've made your offer and the seller has accepted it, you're gonna have to be prepared to pay a deposit. I had to pay a deposit of $5,000. I had to go to my bank and get a bank draft, hand it into my realtor. The deposit is a portion of your down payment. Usually what happens is the deposit will cover your lawyer's fees. So my lawyer's fees were about $1,500, $1,600. That came out of my deposit, and then I had to pay the difference for the down payment, which was $40,000 later on in the process. Number 6 is the negotiation process and the inspections. So after you have agreed upon a price, the next step is to figure out when you're gonna have that home inspection and what you might like as your possession date. For me, I had an apartment that I still had a few months on my lease, and my property manager wasn't going to allow me to break that lease early. So I picked a possession date that was probably 2 or 3 months away from when I actually made that offer. After you have the home inspection, you're gonna get a list of things that need to be repaired or things that they recommend be updated. There were a few small things in the place that needed to be fixed. There was a bit of a leak. There were some electrical issues and a few piping issues from some of the additions that they had added into the suite. Just after the inspection, after the report came out, I sent all of those documents to my realtor, who then in turn sent it to the seller's realtor, and we went through the process of going back and forth. At this point, because there were a few deficiencies that actually really needed to be fixed, the seller agreed to fix all of them, and we would remain on the same sale price. I did just have a general home inspection done, but if I can make a recommendation at this stage, I would also ask that you not only do a full home inspection, but also get a specific, if you have issues with specific items. For us, when we had the home inspection, there was leaking from our unit into the one below. And if I could do this over again, I would also have a contingency in that offer to have a plumber do a full inspection. So after all of those repairs were completed, I had a back and forth through my realtor with the seller that I would be able to have a plumber go in and make sure that the leak that was present previously was fixed. This is why I recommend having a plumber go in, or maybe even an electrician if you have concerns about that. The plumber picked up on a lot more things that the home inspector did, and because it wasn't a contingency in that offer, I wasn't able to go after the seller to fix the plumbing problems. The home inspection was like $350 and the plumber inspection was about the same. I think it's definitely worth it to get both if you have a concern about something very specific. Another thing about the home inspection is they're not looking for anything cosmetic. They're not looking for any small defects. They're only looking for large issues, specifically with appliances. So they're gonna run all of your appliances, all of the plumbing, everything, make sure everything is good. Number 7 is the condo document review. Originally, I had planned on hiring a condo document review company to actually go through those documents and let me know what the issues are, if everything was good. When I first got the condo documents, I decided to actually sit down and read through all of them. It took me maybe 2 to 3 hours to do this. And I am somewhat familiar with condominiums and their budgets and reserve funds. And I've been to a lot of conferences where there's been a lot of condo boards and discussion around this kind of thing. So I was somewhat familiar with this. Also, being really into personal finance and obviously fire, I have a lot of experience reading through financial documents, so I'm very comfortable looking at numbers and understanding what they mean. The condo documents that I got for this place were what I would say very thorough. They had all their AGM, which is their annual general meeting notes, where they discuss kind of higher level issues. They also had a special assessment within the last year at the time. I think it was last summer. They had an engineer go through and check every critical system in the building and kind of say, okay, well, this might need to be repaired at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. And at the end, they recommend how much you should, or the condo board should increase the condo fees to meet those repair needs in the future. So I read through all of these documents with a fine-tooth comb. I looked at their insurance. I looked at everything that I thought would be a concern. My number one concern was a reserve fund. That is something that I think you should, if you're not going to use a condo document review company, then you should definitely look at the financials of the condo corporation to see how they're doing. If they're in the negative, that's a huge, huge, huge red flag, and you should definitely run for the hills on that. So there were some things that I looked at that, okay, this place is in good shape and they're really taking care of it. They're taking action, and the condo board is serious about maintaining the property. That is something that's massive with a condo. I'd be very wary about buying in a condominium where there isn't really a lot of documents or documentation on how they're maintaining the place. Also, with brand new condos, sometimes there is no condo board yet. So you're dealing with a property manager who hasn't really set up much of everything that you get with an older building where they've had many years to accumulate these funds and to figure out where the pain points are in the building. It's just something to consider. Sometimes an older building is cheaper as well. And a lot of the times it's been around for so long that it's been maintained well. You just have to look at the documents, and if you don't feel comfortable, get a company to review them for you and go through it with you. The fee for getting a condo doc review company in to take a look at these, I think, is around $400 to $500. So number 8 is when you're ready to waive all of your conditions. This is when you've had your home inspection, you have your list of repairs that are needed, and the seller or you or whatever, you've come to an agreement on how those are going to be repaired and that they've actually been repaired. Another thing to waive is your financing condition, which is the fact that you're actually going to get a mortgage. That's something you have to waive as well. Once you've waived all your conditions and you've signed off and everything, you're going to get a request from your bank to send them a copy of those waived conditions and that the sale is getting close to being finalized. So with my application process through TD, I did everything online and over the phone with my mortgage representative. And there was sort of like a portal that I went into, and the rep would put what I needed to put in there. So my down payment came from my TFSA, and she needed to see all the documents I had from my TFSA, what my TFSA was invested in when it was invested. And I had to attach a few pay stubs on there and some other information. There was a letter of employment that I had to put on there. So anyway, the rep will send you everything that you need to give them in order to move the process along. I found it actually really quite easy, and the rep at TD walked me through everything. She gave me a phone call about once a week just to make sure everything was moving along smoothly, which was awesome because I'd never done this before. I didn't know what to expect, and I just wanted it to be as easy as possible. Number 9 is your mortgage finalization. So after you've sent your bank all of these documents, they're good to go. They say that they don't need anything else. You're gonna go into a branch in person to actually go through the final documents of your mortgage and sign off on everything. They're gonna ask you if you want credit protection, which I waived. Credit protection is, I think in its most basic terms, is if you lose your job and stuff, they're gonna cover a portion of the payment. And I've looked into this before, and it's just not something that I'm interested in, not something that I want. So when you're finalizing your mortgage, at the same time, I would recommend that you get a bank draft for the remaining portion of your down payment. So earlier you would have been in touch with a lawyer, which I completely skipped that step. So when you're finalizing your mortgage, you do want to make sure that you have contacted a lawyer. I use McKay Law. There are a few, if you just Google real estate law in Calgary, there's a few that pop up. I had read a lot of reviews about McKay Law, and they just sounded great. So they had their fees listed on their website as well, and it seemed reasonable. They were somewhat close. Their office was somewhat close to where I lived at the time. So it just worked out that way that I went with them. And I just emailed them back and forth about, hey, I'm purchasing property, when it comes time, I want to work with you guys, blah, blah, blah. And I started that process quite a bit earlier, but you don't really have to do it until later on when you're getting into the final stages of buying a property is when you really need the lawyer. So during the mortgage finalization, you have paid that deposit. Earlier on, I did say that a portion of that deposit is going to probably pay for your lawyer's fees. So when you're paying that deposit earlier in the process, you should really already be in contact with your lawyer. When you're finalizing your mortgage, you're going to take out a bank draft of the remaining amount for your deposit, and that amount is actually going to come from your lawyer. So at that point, your lawyer should have all the documents, the same kind of documents that you sent to your bank earlier in the process. You're going to send all of that to the lawyer as well. That is the purchase agreement and all of the mortgage stuff that your bank is going to send back to you. They're going to send you, the lawyer's going to send you a form that breaks down all of their pricing line by line and the deposit and how much they're taking all of their fees out of your deposit and then what your down payment is supposed to be. And that check is payable to your lawyer. And once your lawyer gets it, goes through it, checks everything, they contact the seller's lawyer. They make all their finalizations and then they will send the money to the seller once everything is closed. So number 10 is your lawyer meeting. And this is your meeting with your lawyer actually in person. These are the items that your lawyer is going to need you to bring into the office, or the ones I talked about earlier that they want you to email, send them, just to make this meeting a lot more smooth. If you do this earlier on, it's a lot easier. They're going to ask for your property tax decision, and that is whether you're going to pay for your property tax all in one lump sum, or you're going to take advantage of the TIP program. That's TIPP, and that is a monthly payment plan for your property taxes. That's what I personally went into because it's just a lot easier to pay a couple $100s a month instead of $2,000 all at once. They're going to ask for proof of insurance. So in a condo, the only insurance you need is internal insurance, like renter's insurance, similar to that. It's a little bit different. Just talk to your insurance company about what you need to insure its contents inside your unit. After you go into your lawyer's office and you've signed off on everything, it's pretty much a done deal at that point. Number 11 should be to sign up for TIP if you want to go that way. Otherwise, you are going to pay your property tax all in one lump sum, which is totally fine if you want to do that. Number 12 is your pre-possession walkthrough. So this is required, I believe it's 24 to 48 hours before you actually get possession. And I set this up through my realtor, and just to make sure that the property is still in the same condition as when you agree to buy it. So you're gonna make sure that all of the belongings that the seller is supposed to remove have been removed. There's no additional damage. Number 13, which is the last step, is possession day. This is the big day. This is what you've been waiting for. You have been waiting, like me, for months to get out of your old fucking apartment and get into a nice new condo and get ready and start painting and all of that good stuff. On possession day, you're gonna meet your realtor anytime after noon. I met my realtor around 2 o'clock, 2:30 that day. That is when your realtor is gonna hand the keys over to you for your property. They're gonna give you the keys, they're gonna hand everything over. My realtor was awesome. He brought a little gift and it was very exciting, but also I just wanted to get in there and get things moving. And I'm gonna add a few notes onto the end of this because I have been in my condo now for just over a month. And there were a few things with moving in that are very different than moving into a home. Very similar to moving into or out of an apartment. You have to contact the property manager or the condo board, set up a time for the elevator if there is one in your building, and just make sure that they're aware that you're moving in. If you have pets, you have to declare them. So it's just very similar to moving into a rental. Yeah, that is it for buying a condo in Calgary. I hope this has helped somebody out there in making a decision because there are quite a lot of steps. Thanks for joining me, guys. Have an awesome day.